The rain was so heavy it sounded like someone drumming on the roof with flat hands, turning the driveway of the Pierce residence into a river of tiny mirrors. Inside, the house tried to speak in hushes. For 15 years, Amelia Pierce had slept through seasons and holidays, her body breathing because machines reminded it to. The photographs on the walls, wedding day, a sunburned beach, a Thanksgiving with too many pies, looked like doorways sealed with glass. Nathan Pierce, whose companies wired half the state with clean power and whose name showed up on museum wings, sat in the same chair by the bed and talked to his wife as if the air could carry messages into sleep. He told her what the board had argued about, which neighbor's dog kept learning new escape routes, and how the sunrise had made the skyscrapers blush. He did not know if any of it reached her. He only knew that pausing would feel like leaving her alone in a long hallway. On a gray Monday in November, Rochelle Bennett arrived with her son, Marcus. Rochelle was in her 40s, a black woman with hands that knew careful work and a posture that said she had been the one to steady the room more times than she could count. The agency called her a housekeeper, the staff read her like a nurse who had traded scrubs for cardigans. Marcus, 14, was long-limbed and watchful, the kind of quiet that notices everything and tells only what needs telling. Nathan met them at the door and shook their hands the way you shake hands with people you plan to trust. "The apartment above the carriage house is yours," he said. "If you need anything, tell Ms. Hart. The second-floor suite is my wife's room. Voices stay gentle there." Rochelle's first day was a string of small obediences to dignity. She greeted Amelia every time she stepped into the suite. She learned the rhythms of the monitors, what each soft alarm meant, and how to quiet a beep without quieting care. She swapped lilies for peonies because lilies smelled like goodbye and peonies smelled like later. That night, over rice and chicken in the tiny kitchen of the apartment, she told Marcus, "We show up like we expect her to hear. If she can't, kindness will have cost us nothing." Marcus waited 3 days. The room felt like a chapel where people bring their fierce, quiet bargains. On the third afternoon he stood in the doorway while Rochelle changed the linens and said, "Hi, Mrs. Pierce. I'm Marcus. My mom says I should introduce myself like a neighbor, not a guest." He told her about the basketball court near their old apartment and a science teacher who said sound could move the body like weather moves trees. He pulled a paperback from his backpack and read a page. His voice was not loud. It just made room. Rochelle looked up to see Nathan in the doorway, jacket off, tie loosened, surprise softened into gratitude. "Thank you for speaking to her," Nathan said. "I've run out of new stories." "I can read to her, if that helps," Marcus answered, embarrassed by what felt like trespass. "Please," Nathan said, the word setting a chair down for a weary traveler. The ritual came small and then stayed. Each day after school, Marcus sat in the blue chair near the window and read aloud. He brought box scores that translated hustle into fractions, short essays about ordinary courage, and a cookbook paragraph about kneading dough as if waking it from a nap. Sometimes he did not read at all. Sometimes he hummed without a song in mind, the way people hum when the body remembers a comfort the brain cannot name. Rochelle noticed that during the humming Amelia's breathing sometimes deepened. It was not dramatic. It was enough to earn a tiny asterisk in the margin of the log. Ms. Hart called it coincidence. Nathan did not call it anything. He simply adjusted his calendar so he could be in the room at that hour. On the 7th day, a storm clipped the power for a heartbeat and the generator caught the house like a parent catching a child who missed the last step. Marcus had finished reading about a firefighter who kept extra boots for children who lost theirs in emergencies. The room was listening to its own quiet. Nathan stood by the bed with his hand on the blanket. Rochelle turned down the lamp. "Would you hum again?" Nathan asked. Marcus nodded. He let a low, steady melody leave him and make itself at home among the beeps and breaths. He did not try to aim it. He offered it. Rochelle folded her hands the way she did on Sundays when the choir reached a note that asked for agreement. Amelia's eyelids flickered. Everyone froze. It could have been a reflex, a draft, the mind's wish painted onto a face. Marcus stopped. The quiet flattened. Rochelle took one step forward. "Again," she said softly. He hummed again, letting the tone lean into long notes like a person leaning into a corner during a hard wind. Amelia's fingers gathered and released. The monitor showed a slope where the line had been flat as a prairie. Nathan pressed the call button. The nurse arrived with practiced calm, checked pupils, recorded times, and asked Marcus to keep humming. She thanked him in the voice people use for first snows and answered prayers. The neurologist called back with instructions that sounded like humility: keep the routine, observe, do not promise. After the nurse left, the room exhaled. Nathan sank into the chair as if it had been holding a place for his hope and could finally hand it back. Rochelle touched the bed rail and went to heat broth because caring is also soup. Marcus sat very still, startled by the risk of believing. He came back the next afternoon with a recording he had made on his phone, his humming layered twice to thicken the sound. He set the speaker near the foot of the bed and kept the volume at the level of breath. He read about community gardens and a librarian who started a bedtime story hotline. He told Amelia he was trying out for varsity even if the odds laughed first. Amelia's toes flexed. A moment later her mouth shaped a sound without letting it leave. Rochelle cried softly, like rain sliding down a window. Nathan turned toward the glass and let the city lights blur into something kinder. The nurse added arrows in the margins of the chart, as if drawing a map from sleep back to waking. In the hall, when Marcus was leaving, Nathan stopped him. "Whatever you need for school," he said quietly, "let me help. You brought my wife away to hear us. I want to make sure the world hears you." "I just don't want to mess it up," Marcus said. "What if tomorrow nothing happens?" "Then we stand here anyway," Nathan answered. "We stand here until it does." Before Rochelle and Marcus, the house had learned to lower its voice. Staff spoke in courteous sentences and moved like librarians. Nathan's sister visited once a week. Nathan himself had become fluent in the grammar of waiting, the honest check-ins with nurses, the careful questions for specialists, the way you carry hope. He had a reputation for speed in business, yet he learned to sit without fidgeting, to tell Amelia about an ordinary sandwich as if it were a letter, to describe the sky's color like an eyewitness. That was why Marcus's arrival felt less like a miracle and more like a practice finally finding its echo. Rochelle could see it. She watched Nathan stand a little straighter during the reading hour, watched his hand rest on the blanket with gentleness. She listened to Marcus choose words that made a room feel inhabitable, the little stories about a bus driver who kept paperbacks on the dashboard, a neighbor who shoveled the shared sidewalk first, a teacher who lent a calculator without fuss. Even the koi in the courtyard pond seemed to pause whenever his humming began, as if water could listen. And so the days began to earn their keep. When the humming started to make a measurable difference, Rochelle didn't declare victory. She adjusted the pillows, checked the humidifier, and told Marcus afterward that what he brought was steadiness more than sound. "Keep doing what you can keep doing," she said. "The rest doesn't belong to us yet." That night, in the small apartment above the carriage house, Rochelle tucked a blanket around her son and watched him fall asleep with earbuds in, a faint trace of his own humming keeping time. In the main house, Nathan sat one more hour and described a sunrise Amelia had not seen but might still recognize. After 15 years, the house felt the floor shift a fraction, as if something beneath it had decided to rise. Tomorrow would be the measure. Tonight was the promise. The next morning's sunlight pushed its way through the tall windows of the Pierce estate. It spilled across the polished floors like a visitor too insistent to ignore. The household stirred earlier than usual. Staff whispered in hallways, not with dread this time but with a kind of cautious wonder. Word had traveled quickly, Mrs. Pierce had moved. Fingers had curled, eyelids had trembled. After 15 years, a ripple had disturbed the still pond. Nathan was already in the suite when Marcus arrived with his schoolbooks. His eyes were red, not from drink but from staying awake all night replaying the moment in his mind. He had sat with Amelia until dawn, afraid that if he left, the fragile thread would snap. When he saw Marcus, he managed a tired smile that still carried gratitude. "You're right on time," Nathan said softly. Marcus pulled the chair closer. "I didn't want to miss today." He opened a book of short stories and began reading. His voice was steady, though inside his chest, nerves rattled. He didn't know if last night had been a fluke, if the small miracle would vanish like smoke. Still, he read. He told Amelia about a farmer who built a playground for children in his community, about a girl who fixed bicycles for neighbors who couldn't afford repairs. Between paragraphs, he hummed again, the same low tune that had cracked open silence the night before. Rochelle stood near the window, folding laundry she'd brought up, though she hardly needed to. She was watching her son, trying to understand how a boy she once hushed to sleep with the same tune could now use it to stir someone from a 15-year dream. And then it happened again. Amelia's lips twitched, as though forming a word they had forgotten the shape of. Her hand moved beneath the blanket, not a reflex but a slow, deliberate curl. The monitor beeped faster, as if it too had caught Hope's fever. Nathan leaned forward, his hand trembling. "Amelia? Can you hear us?" Her eyes stayed shut, but her head turned ever so slightly toward Marcus's voice. The nurse rushed in, summoned by the monitor's alarms. She checked reflexes, spoke Amelia's name, adjusted the 4. When Marcus hummed once more, the nurse gasped. Amelia's eyelashes lifted again, revealing a sliver of hazel beneath. For Nathan, it was as if the world cracked open. Tears he hadn't allowed himself in years carved new lines on his face. He clasped Amelia's hand and whispered, "Stay with me, love. Stay." The nurse called the doctor, who arrived within the hour. Tests were ordered, scans scheduled, blood drawn. But amid the clinical bustle, one fact stood like a lighthouse: Amelia was responding. That night, after the doctor left, Nathan turned to Rochelle in the hallway. "Your son has done something no specialist could. I don't know how to thank you." Rochelle shook her head. "Don't thank me. Marcus just offered what he has. Maybe that's all any of us can do." Nathan's voice cracked. "Then what he has is a gift." The days that followed felt like a slow dawn. Amelia's movements grew stronger. A finger squeeze here, a slight groan there, a flutter of her eyes. The medical staff remained cautious. 15 years is a long time for muscles to forget their duties, but they could not deny the change. Each afternoon Marcus returned, school bag still slung over his shoulder, and read or hummed or simply talked about his day. Amelia, in her own way, seemed to lean toward the sound. Nathan began canceling meetings outright instead of rescheduling. Business partners grew restless, but Nathan didn't care. "My company can wait," he told his assistant. "My wife has already waited long enough." One evening, after Marcus had finished reading about a marathon runner who overcame injury, Nathan sat with him in the library. A fire burned low in the hearth. Nathan studied the boy with an intensity that made Marcus shift in his chair. "You know," Nathan said slowly, "for years I prayed for a miracle. I thought it would come in the form of a new treatment or a breakthrough drug. Never did I imagine it would come in the form of a 14-year-old boy with a book bag and a song." Marcus lowered his eyes. "I just didn't want her to be lonely." Nathan's throat tightened. "You gave her what billions of dollars couldn't. You gave her presence." By the end of the second week, Amelia's eyes opened more fully. She could not yet speak, but her gaze lingered on faces. When Marcus entered the room, her pupils widened as if greeting a familiar sound. The staff began whispering the word recovery, careful not to say it too loud in case it vanished. Rochelle watched her son with awe and a mother's quiet fear. She knew the world could be cruel to boys like him, black, young, gifted in ways society didn't always reward. Yet here he was, standing in the center of a billionaire's mansion, being recognized for what he could give. She prayed silently that this gift would not become a burden. One night, As she tucked Marcus into bed, he asked, "Mom, why me? Why do you think she listens to me?" Rochelle stroked his forehead. "Sometimes the world gets noisy with all the wrong things. Maybe your voice cuts through because you're not asking anything of her. You're just there." Weeks turned into a month. Therapists were brought in to help Amelia begin basic movements, turning her head, lifting her hand, following a finger with her eyes. The progress was slow, fragile, but undeniable. Every session began after Marcus read or hummed. It was as if his presence opened a door the therapists could then step through. Nathan transformed too. He no longer carried grief like armor. He laughed more, he lingered in rooms he used to rush past, and he began to hope out loud instead of silently. At the foundation gala, when asked why he looked lighter, he simply said, "Because sometimes miracles wear sneakers and carry algebra homework." The staff noticed a shift as well. The house, once hushed with mourning, now carried warmth. Flowers lasted longer, sunlight seemed brighter, even the koi in the pond swam closer to the surface. Finally, one crisp morning in late December, as Marcus read aloud from a book of poetry about resilience, Amelia's lips moved. The sound was faint, cracked with disuse, but it was there. One word, barely audible, "Hello." Nathan collapsed into the chair, covering his face with his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. Rochelle, standing in the doorway, pressed a hand to her mouth. Marcus's eyes went wide, his heart thundering. "Mrs. Pierce," he whispered, leaning closer. "It's me, Marcus." Her eyes fluttered, and this time, unmistakably, she looked at him. In that moment, 15 years of silence broke like ice in spring. The recovery would take months, perhaps years. Doctors warned of challenges, muscle atrophy, cognitive hurdles, the need for long rehabilitation. But none of that dimmed the triumph of that first word. Nathan vowed to be by her side for every step. Rochelle stayed on as housekeeper, though she had become something more, an anchor in the storm. And Marcus? He continued to read, to hum, to sit by Amelia's side. He had not set out to perform the impossible. He had only set out to keep someone company. In doing so, he reminded everyone in that great house of the simplest truth: sometimes healing begins not with medicine, but with presence, patience, and the willingness to believe. The Pierce estate was never the same. Where silence once reigned, now there was conversation, laughter, even song. And whenever Marcus's voice filled the room, Amelia's eyes seemed to shine a little brighter, as though she had been waiting all along for a voice that believed she was still here.